Hey guys, tonight we descend into the candlelit corridors of Tudor England to a world that smells faintly of beeswax, rosewater, and, well, centuries of questionable hygiene. You're about to slip quietly into the private chambers of Queen Elizabeth I herself. The glow of the rushlights flickers against tapestries. The air is thick, a strange mix of lavender and something less pleasant lurking underneath. You probably won't survive this olfactory onslaught, but at least it'll be educational, Dad. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in Elizabeth's private chamber, late evening. The court outside buzzes like a hive musician's fading. Courtiers gossiping in whispers. But here, in this intimate space, everything slows. A single lady in waiting approaches the Queen's bed, hands clasped, awaiting orders. Elizabeth sits before a mirror of polished silver, her famous pale face her fairest, the rest melting under the gentle scrape of linen soaked in rosewater and vinegar. Her nightly ritual isn't exactly clean in the way you understand. It's more of a performance of cleanliness. She doesn't bathe often. Instead, she dabs at her face and neck, patting away the thick paste of lead and vinegar that's clung to her all day. You can almost smell the metallic temps of the cosmetic as it loosens. Imagine the soft hiss of the cloth on her skin, the crackle of the hearth nearby. It's oddly calming till you realize that underneath that regal glow, her pores haven't felt open air in weeks. Elizabeth's chamber smells like a strange perfume shop married a barn. There's lavender water in silver bottles, dried herbs hanging from rafters, and at least 3 Pomander's tiny balls filled with cloves and ambergris to purify the air. The Tudors believed foul smells caused disease, so scent itself was a form of armor. Tonight, her attendants refilled the little pomander at her waist, stuffing it with crushed cinnamon and rose petals. You can almost picture it swinging like a personal air freshener. One of the Queen's closest attendants, perhaps her gentlewoman of the bedchamber, helps her change into her night shift. That garment, thin, fine linen, embroidered near the collar racks like both pajamas and towel. Remember this, in Elizabeth's time, linen is the substitute for soap. You don't scrub away dirt, you absorb it. Clean linen equals a clean body, and the Queen, naturally, owns hundreds of such shifts. Changed daily, or at least whenever she feels particularly generous toward hygiene. Now, it's an awkwardness to the scene. The Queen doesn't sleep alone, not truly. There are always attendants nearby, on duty, even through the night. Privacy is a luxury even a monarch rarely enjoys. You watch as the fire dims, and the room becomes quiet, except for the rustle of fabric and the faint squeak of a chamber pot being discreetly moved to a corner. Elizabeth might prefer her body to remain mysterious, but nature never quite cooperates. Historians still argue whether her attendants kept records of every bodily habits, and notes and letters suggest they did. It's equal parts gossip and bureaucracy. Imagine being the courtier responsible for reporting that Her Majesty has taken to sweet wine gargles thrice nightly. That's job security of a very specific sort. Tonight, though, there's a sense of ritual dignity. Elizabeth reclines, her golden wig now resting on a wooden stand nearby. Beneath it, her natural hair thinning and perhaps tinged with grays, combed gently with an ivory comb dipped in rosemary oil. The scent is sharp and comforting, a Tudor version of scalp therapy. But remember that hair hasn't met shampoo. Washing means wiping with oil and powdering with starch to keep lice at bay. A cat prowls the edges of the room, perhaps a mouser or just one of the Queen's tolerated companions. The candlelight flickers across its fur as you take in the details. The tapestries embroidered with unicorns, the polished floorboards that still bear the waxy footprints of courtiers. Every inch of this chamber is both sacred and suspect, smelling faintly of power and perspiration. Elizabeth herself, despite the grime of her time, believed in a kind of purity tied to control. Cleanliness, to her, wasn't about washing, it was about presentation, about appearing untouched by the common filth of mortality. To keep her body mysterious, to avoid too much exposure, was to preserve majesty itself. The less she bathed, the more otherworldly she remained. The idea is uncomfortable, yet fascinating. You shift slightly, almost embarrassed by the intimacy of it all. This is, after all, the Queen's nightly space, somewhere between regal and human. The chamber pot stands like a loyal servant. A folded towel of fine Holland linen sits nearby, ready for any emergency. She's known to have been meticulous about certain small details, like never letting anyone see her teeth without her say-so, or insisting that her bed linens be scented with orris root. These micro-rituals of control reveal a woman both vulnerable and touchable. You hear laughter echo faintly through the walls, perhaps from the guardroom. Caps the ghostly chatter of the past. You realize that this is not just about hygiene, it's about survival. In a world without plumbing, without germ theory, and without privacy, maintaining any sense of royal dignity required theater, and Elizabeth was the greatest performer of them all. Your eyes linger on the small bowl of rosewater again, cloudy now from Leeds residue. Somewhere in the scent of roses and rust, you catch the story of a monarch balancing beauty, power, and decay. Her attendants blow out the final candle. The darkness folds over her, and the night in Tudor England grows still rich, with the smell of human effort disguised as elegance, as you drift alongside that flickering consciousness between cleanliness and illusion. You can't help but think this was hygiene as identity, dirt as divinity, and Elizabeth ruled both. Morning creeps through the mullioned windows, and the first beams of pale light reach the heavy curtains around Elizabeth's bed. You stir in the corner, still invisible, still watching as she wakes to a world that's damp, cold, and blissfully unaware of hot showers. The chambermaids move like shadows, rekindling the hearth, pouring water into a shallow copper basin. It looks promising. You almost expect a bath. But no, don't get too excited. The Queen of England, the most powerful woman in the Western world, might not bathe again for another month. To the Tudors, water was both life and danger. People whispered that bathing opened the pores and let in sickness. Hot water was especially suspicious. It weakened the flesh, doctors warned. Imagine being terrified of your own steam. And yet, Elizabeth's contemporaries genuinely believed that soaking in a tub could invite plagues straight into the bloodstream. You could wash your hands, sure, but submerging your whole body. Reckless, almost sinful. Elizabeth herself reportedly claimed she took a bath once a month, whether she needed it or not. Kate joke, maybe, but not far from truth. Bathing was an event. Her private bathing chamber at Whitehall Palace, a rarity in its day, had a wooden tub lined with sheets of linen, sometimes perfumed with herbs. The water, heated by servants carrying buckets from the kitchen fires, was steeped with rosemary or orris root to disguise whatever impurities might lurk. The Queen's attendants hovered, monitoring the process with a kind of seriousness we reserve for rocket launches. When she finally decided to bathe, it wasn't spontaneous. Physicians would approve the timing. Astrologers might even be consulted. Historians still argue whether the Queen's baths were medically scheduled or simply ceremonial, like a royal version of spring cleaning. Either way, every soak was planned like a state affair. But let's be honest, even clean water wasn't exactly clean. The Thames, glittering outside the palace, was basically London's sewer. Buckets of it were drawn, filtered through cloth, and boiled, but still carried the city's invisible grime. You can almost smell the damp metal scent as steam fills the room. Elizabeth steps into the tub, attendants holding screens around her modesty intact, at least symbolically. And here's where things get, well, medievally complicated. Once she's done, she's dried not with a towel, but with soft linen sheets. The idea is to absorb moisture gently so the skin remains closed. Too much rubbing might irritate the humors. The same theory applied to washing hair best avoided, as wet hair was believed to cause rheums or colds. So, instead, Elizabeth's hair would be dusted with starch or perfumed powder and combed carefully to remove lice. It's the kind of routine that sounds elegant until you remember the smell. For daily upkeep, she preferred what we'd now call a sponge bath, a cloth dipped in rose water or vinegar, gently wiped across the face, neck, and hands. This wasn't just a cosmetic, it was medicinal. Vinegar was a disinfectant, rose water soothing to the skin. The result was a kind of fragrant cleanliness, at least to those accustomed to a world without soap bubbles. Still, Elizabeth took pride in appearing immaculate. Her ladies changed her shifts those undergarments made of fine linen frequently. She associated freshness with virtue. You might think of it as a symbolic hygiene. As long as the visible layers stayed pure, so did the soul beneath. This idea went deep in Tudor culture. People genuinely thought wearing clean linen drew out impurities from the body. A 16th century physician once advised, change your shirt often, and thou need not bathe. It's the same energy as skipping the gym but buying new sneakers. Feel better already? Now, smell of the court was legendary. Imagine hundreds of courtiers crammed into halls without deodorant or plumbing. Perfumes and herbs struggled heroically to hold the line. Elizabeth's chambers were filled with bowls of dried lavender, rose petals, and even juniper berries. The queen herself favored a custom scent, citrusy, laced with ambergris, a waxy substance produced by sperm whales that, bizarrely, smells divine once aged. It was expensive, exotic, slightly revolting, much like Tudor hygiene itself. As you watch her attendants clear away the basin, you notice the ritual precision. Each cloth folded, each droplet of used water whisked away, as if the act itself were sacred. Cleanliness isn't about being germ-free, it's about being royal. The Queen's body represents the state, her purity, symbolic of England's virtue. Dirt isn't filth, it's treasonous. That's why no one ever dared mention body odor, even when the summer heat turned the palace into a slow cooker. Elizabeth's physician, Dr. John Dee, the astrologer mystic, who doubled as an early scientist, once recommended special herbal washes to balance her humors. He believed the right combination of heat, moisture, and fragrance could preserve not just health, but divine favor. As within, so without, he might have said. The Queen's bathing habits weren't neglect. They were spiritual strategy. Of course, not everyone agreed. Continental ambassadors, more accustomed to frequent baths in the warmer climates of Spain or Italy, sometimes wrote home in barely concealed horror. One Venetian visitor noted that the English cleanse less the body than the linen. Polite diplomacy, for they smell like trouble. But even he admired the Queen's immaculate gowns, her sparkling jewelry, the illusion of perfection she maintained. You can't help but marvel at the psychological gymnastics of it all. Here's a monarch who controls empires, commands armies, and yet fears a draft of cold air after a bath. Her caution isn't paranoia, it's survival. The memory of the Black Death still lingers in Tudor minds. Disease is everywhere, invisible and blamed on smells, bad spirits, or humoral imbalance. A closed pore, a protected body that's health. And there's something poetic about it too. Each unbathed inch of Elizabeth's skin becomes a political metaphor. Restraint, order, self-control. She rules even over her own filth. You imagine her reclining after the rare bath, wrapped in perfumed linens, eyes half closed as musicians play softly outside. For one brief evening, the scent of rosemary masks the damp wood, and the world seems balanced. But tomorrow, the basin will stay cold, the linen unchanged. Life will go on, perfumed and proud, a triumph of elegance over evidence. The next morning dawns gray, and the air inside the palace is cool enough to make you shiver. You can almost feel the draft slipping under the doors, sneaking across the flagstones, and crawling up Elizabeth's ankles. Her attendants are already at work, laying out fresh linens, smooth, white, faintly scented with lavender and folding it in careful squares. No bath again today, of course, but this, the changing of linen, is her purification. You might think of linen as just fabric, okay? But in the 16th century, it's status, medicine, and moral hygiene all at once. To change your linen is to change your skin. For Elizabeth, those fine Holland shifts are her first and most intimate armor. She trusts linen to do what soap cannot, to absorb sweat, oil, and whatever else lingers between human effort and royal poise. When her women remove yesterday's shift, they handle it with reverence and maybe a small grimace, for even queens perspire beneath brocade and ruff. The idea runs deep. Fresh linen draws impurities out of the body, much as a plaster draws out poison. It's an elegant fiction, but one everyone believes. Physicians assure the court that daily changes of linen cleanse the body without risking exposure to cold water or bad air. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's obsession with fine fabric came from vanity or genuine health concerns, but either way, her wardrobe becomes a kind of rolling hygiene system. The linen itself is beautiful woven in Flanders or Ireland, impossibly soft, sometimes edged with tiny stitches only her ladies could see. Each shift was washed, boiled, beaten, bleached, and sun-dried by entire teams of laundresses who worked in steaming sheds near the palace gardens. Their lives were a study in contrast, while the queen's garments smelled of lavender and rose. The washerwomen reeked of lye, smoke, and human effort. Their cracked hands carried royal cleanliness in exchange for exhaustion. When you picture Elizabeth's dressing, it's less like pulling on clothes and more like layering identity. First, the shift clean, white, a symbol of chastity and rebirth. Then the corset, the farthingale, the petticoats, and finally the outer gown, shimmering with embroidery. By the time she appears before her courtiers, she is encased in cloth and perfume, a walking miracle of artifice. But beneath it all, the linen quietly absorbs the truth of her humanity. She changes, shifts daily, sometimes twice during summer heat. Courtiers record that her laundresses were among the most overworked servants in the palace. Yet no one dared question the system. After all, a clean queen meant a stable realm. The linen wasn't just about odor. It was about image. The monarch's purity mirrored England's moral order. Here's a quirky fact. Elizabeth's laundry was marked with tiny embroidered symbols, one for each garment, so her personal linens wouldn't be mixed with anyone else's. You might chuckle, but contamination was a serious fear. Illness was believed to travel through cloths, what we now know as a half-truth, since lice and fleas were real couriers of plague. So, to wear another's shirt was to risk infection, both physical and spiritual. There's something hypnotic about the rhythm of it all. Each morning, the folding and unfolding, the rustle of fabric, the faint slap of wet linen against a wooden table in the laundries below. It's like a heartbeat echoing through the palace. Clean, replace, repeat. The queen's body, untouched by water, remains symbolically spotless because linen has touched it first. Sometimes, Elizabeth even gives her courtiers with small scraps of her used linen washed, perfumed, and treasured as relics. Touching the queen's fabric was touching a piece of her sanctity. There's a strange beauty in that. Though you can't help imagining the irony, these relics of divine purity might once have held traces of lead, sweat, and all the unspoken grit of royal life. And yet, she smells, well, pleasant enough. The blend of rosewater, musk, and fresh linen creates a haze that disguises reality. The courtiers who kneel before her each morning inhale that delicate cloud and interpret it as holiness. To stand too close might reveal the truth, but proximity to power requires a certain tolerance. Let's pause for a moment and imagine the laundry cycle itself. The palace laundries hum with energy, women scrubbing, boiling, hanging lines of fine white fabric in the open air. The scent of soapwort and ashes fills the garden, mingling with smoke. They sing, gossip, laugh. These are the unsung hygienists of the Tudor world. Their labor invisible yet essential. Without them, the illusion of Elizabeth's perfection would crumble overnight. The Queen's linen obsession also shapes economics. The demand for fine fabric feeds entire industries from Flemish weavers to English flax farmers. In a way, her hygiene habits drive trade. Merchants boast of delivering cloth fit for a virgin queen, and towns compete to supply it. Cleanliness, oddly enough, becomes commerce. Still, it's not all elegant ritual. Some mornings, when the air grows heavy and the heat of London presses in, even fresh linen can't disguise the mustiness beneath. Her attendants might sprinkle vinegar on the floors or scatter herbs in the rush's mint, thyme, rosemary to cut through the scent. You can almost smell the mixture. Sharp, earthy, almost edible. For a moment, it feels wholesome, like walking through an herb garden. Then you remember it's covering up the sweat of hundreds. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's reliance on linen over water was progressive or primitive. Some say it reflects a proto-modern understanding of fabric's absorbency and personal boundaries. Others insist it's pure superstition. Maybe both are true. Maybe her linen, always fresh, always white, was her armor against decay in every sense, bodily, moral, political. As the day moves forward, the Queen steps out into her audience chamber. The courtiers bow low, eyes fixed on the floor. They see perfection. They smell lavender. They believe. And somewhere, deep beneath the layers of linen and lace, you know the truth. This is cleanliness as theater, performed with exquisite discipline. You watch her move through the hall, her skirts whispering like wings, her scent leaving a trail of myth behind her. The linen beneath her gown silent, unseen, does its quiet, dirty work. The afternoon light slants across the palace windows, catching in the dust and perfume that hang in the air like invisible silk. You can almost smell the layer's rose musk. Something spicy beneath it, all mixing with a faint taint of candle smoke and bodies in brocade. You follow Elizabeth as she steps into her privy chamber, that smaller, more intimate space where she works, eats, and sometimes just breathes away from the crowd. The moment she enters, two attendants rush forward with trays of glass bottles, perfumes, oils, scented waters. Scented water sits her invisible armor. In Tudor England, scent is both status and survival. When you can't rely on soap and water, you rely on aroma. Elizabeth knew this better than anyone. Her scent wasn't just personal, it was political. She understood that smell shaped perception. A sweet-smelling queen could rule sweeter than a foul-smelling one. Perfume was not vanity, it was propaganda. The attendants uncork a vial of aquamabilis, a distillation of alcohol, herbs, and citrus imported from Italy. It's rare and expensive, infused with rosemary, lavender, and a whisper of clove. The Queen dips a finger, dabbing it at her wrists, behind her ears, even at the folds of her lace collar. She inhales, and for a brief moment, she seems almost mortal, again pleased, perhaps even comforted. You imagine the scent filling the room, warm and clean and sharply floral, cutting through the damp Tudor air. Yet, beneath all that sweetness lies a deeper truth. These perfumes were as much medicine as luxury. Doctors of the time insisted that pleasant smells could ward off disease, since they believed illness traveled through my asthma's bad ear. Made sense that good air could heal or protect. A perfumed queen was, in their minds, a healthy one. Historians still argue whether this olfactory defense had any real effect beyond psychological reassurance, but it's clear Elizabeth believed in its power. One of her favorites, according to court gossip, was a concoction of musk and ambergris, aged in a small gold flask. Ambergris, remember that one? The waxy substance found in the bellies of whales smells oddly divine after months of aging. Its warm, salty sweetness gave perfume a richness unmatched by anything else. The same ingredient that made sailors retch on discovery now floated in the Queen's presence like incense. You have two Laffits, the ultimate Tudor paradox, beauty born from stomach bile. And there's more. Beside the perfumes stand pomanders, tiny ornate orbs of gold filigree dangling from chains. They're filled with crushed herbs, spices, even vinegar-soaked cloths. Elizabeth wears one at her waist, another tucked into her sleeve. Each time she moves, the scent drifts around her moving shield of fragrance. You can picture it, glittering as she gestures, the constant signal that the air around her is pure and divine. The courtiers, of course, follow her example. The court becomes a walking garden of clashing aromas. Men smell of civet musk, women of roses, cloves, and orange peel. You think it's delightful, but together, it's dizzying. Step too close, and it's like breathing through a spice cupboard. Yet the Queen reigns over this fragrant chaos. Her own perfume always the strongest note. The smell even becomes part of her legend. Letters from foreign ambassadors mention her sweet presence, her divine fragrance. One French diplomat claimed her very breath smelled of violets. You have to suspect flattery after all. No one wants to offend a monarch, but there's truth hidden there too. Elizabeth's control of scent was meticulous. It extended to her clothing, her hair, even the rushes on her floor. Each chamber had its own blend of herbs, lavender for calm, thyme for cleansing, and dried bay leaves to repel pests. The Queen's obsession with perfume wasn't entirely unique, though she perfected it. Across Europe, the rich hid behind fragrance. But while French nobles might bathe more often, English courtiers made up for it in creativity. Some even carried silver-smelling boxes lined with vinegar-soaked sponges to sniff when the stench of London became unbearable. It's basically a 16th century version of carrying hand sanitizer, except fancier, and smell IER. Every now and then, Elizabeth herself would commission new scents. Apothecaries competed to impress her, bringing recipes from Venice, Seville, or Constantinople. One promised a fragrant balm of eternal youth, another a scented oil of immortality. The Queen, ever curious, tested them all. Imagine her surrounded by jars, a monarch playing chemist, her fingers stained with petals and oils. There's a tenderness to that image, a powerful woman chasing comfort through aroma. But not every fragrance was pleasant. Some ingredients were, let's say, ambitious. Animal musk from civet cats, castoreum from beavers, ambergris from whales all natural, all pungent before processing. It took art and patience to make them heavenly. The irony is that the most luxurious perfumes often started out smelling like something dragged through a swamp. Tudor glamour was a full contact sport. Occasionally, you catch her rubbing scented vinegar on her hands before meeting petitioners. It's not just cleanliness, it's protection. She believes the scent purifies the air she breathes, guarding against contagion. You might call it superstition, but in a world without germ theory, it's sensible enough. The fragrance becomes her invisible moat. And let's not forget the social dimension. When Elizabeth moves through her court, her scent precedes her. People literally smell her arrival. It's both warning and blessing. The courtiers lower their heads, pretending reverence, but really they're in Hellinga ritual of olfactory worship. Her perfume becomes presence, her presence power. Yet even here, there's humor in the contrast. Somewhere in the palace kitchens, under all this perfumed elegance, someone's boiling vinegar and herbs for the next batch. A scullion wipes sweat from her brow, muttering that if perfume were truly holy, it might scrub the floor for her. You can almost hear it. History's small, tired laugh under all the grandeur. Still, there's no denying the effectiveness. In this humid, candle-warmed court, Elizabeth's scent lingers long after she's gone a ghost made of flowers and authority. It's her signature, her defense, her myth. And as you stand in the empty chamber, breathing in the last trace of her perfume, you realize cleanliness here isn't about purity. It's about permanence. She doesn't wash away the dirt, she overwrites it with power that smells of roses. The mirror catches the morning light, scattering it across the room like shards of pale gold. You stand just behind Elizabeth as she leans toward her reflection, eyes narrowed, hands steady. Before her lies an array of tiny jars, brushes, and powders, her daily arsenal. This is where beauty meets chemistry, and hygiene takes a rather alarming detour. Her face, once scrubbed gently with rose water and linen, is now a blank canvas awaiting transformation. You've seen this ritual before, the quiet intensity, the faint scent of vinegar, and that unmistakable shimmer of white. Today, she will rebuild her most famous masks, the mask of youth, as courtiers whisper, a concoction of white lead, vinegar, and egg white. It gleams in the light like porcelain, flawless, divine, and deadly. Elizabeth's skin is legendary, described by poets as fair as driven snow. But you now know the cost of that perfection. The paste, known as Venetian cerus, eats away at the skin over time, causing sores that require yet more paste to cover. It's a vicious cycle of beauty feeding on itself. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth realized the danger or simply accepted it as the price of power. After all, her appearance isn't vanity's politics. The white face is her brand. You watch her dip a slender brush into the milky mixture and begin applying it in slow, careful strokes. Each movement is ceremonial, as though she's painting authority onto her skin. The lead compound gives her that pale, almost supernatural glow, half goddess, half ghost. And while the court gasps in awe, her skin beneath quietly suffers. The vinegar in the cerus helps it spread evenly, giving a smooth texture. The scent is sharp, acidic, cutting through the sweet perfume that fills the room. You almost flinch at the thought of how it must sting. Yet Elizabeth doesn't react. She's trained herself to stillness, to the illusion of ease. Power, after all, demands composure even when it burns. Once the first layer dries, she dusts it with a fine powder made of ground alabaster and orris root. It's like watching frost settle on marble. Then comes the rouge touch of color on the cheeks, made from cochineal beetles imported from the New World. Tiny insects crushed into scarlet powder, symbol of empire disguised as blush. You can't help but marvel at how global trade has already infiltrated her dressing table. Spanish dyes, Italian lead, Arabian musk. Her beauty is a map of conquest. There's a moment when she studies herself, eyes flicking from one side of the mirror to the other. The effect is stunning and unnerving. The face staring back is both human and mythic, radiant yet rigid, like a living statue. The courtiers will see only perfection. They won't notice the tiny fissures at the corners of her mouth or the faint, grayish tone beneath the white. Elizabeth's ladies noted the truth, of course. They see the redness when the mask comes off, the sores that need ointment, the way the queen sometimes winces when smiling too wide. There are whispers of special salves, mercury-based creams meant to heal the damage. Imagine that, treating one poison with another. It's a miracle she lives past 50, let alone 70. You glance toward a nearby shelf where other jars await. One holds the queen's cold cream, rumored to be a blend of spermaceti, rose oil, and beeswax. Another, labeled simply balm for blemishes, likely contains vinegar, alum, and crushed pearls. The Tudors adored the idea of purity through refinement. If something was rare or precious, surely it must heal. Never mind the toxins. It's easy to judge from your safe, modern distance. But in her world, Cosmetics are hygiene. They protect the skin from the sun, seal it against disease-laden air, and preserve the illusion of health. Water is feared, so the face must be defended by chemistry. The white mask isn't deception, it's survival. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's later portraits reflect vanity or necessity. Some say the heavy makeup hid the toll of illness and age. Others suggest it became symbolic her whiteness, representing divine virginity, a body politic untouched by decay. Whatever the truth, that face becomes England's emblem. When people see her, they see the nation pure, controlled, eternal. But you can't help wondering about the quiet moments after court, when the audience is gone and she sits before the mirror again, peeling away her power layer by layer. The cloth, once white, turns gray with lead and rouge. Her skin beneath is blotched, tired, fragile. Does she ever look at herself and long for air on her face, for a sun without consequence? Probably not. The queen cannot afford humanity in public. Her flesh is property of the crown. There's a rumor, half legend, half truth, that Elizabeth experimented with youth waters, mixtures promising to restore vitality. One such recipe included honey, rosewater, and powdered eggshells boiled into a paste. Another suggested the milk of a young woman of good complexion. You can almost hear her apothecaries muttering, measuring, hoping. It's early science and late superstition dancing together. A funny thought crosses your mind. In today's world, this might all sound like an influencer's skincare routine, except with slightly more lead. 3 light jokes are almost mandatory in this narration. So here's one. If Elizabeth had an Instagram account, the captions would probably read, "Tried the new Venetian, see Rue Stingley. Hashtag no filter, hashtag possibly toxic." Yet, beneath the humor, there's something touching. This powerful woman, ruler of empires, still wrestles with mortality in the mirror each morning. She's both monarch and alchemist, blending vanity and vulnerability into one shimmering mask. When the transformation is complete, she rises, regal and glowing. The courtiers waiting outside won't see lead, they'll see light. She's become an icon again, her skin like moonstone, her perfume trailing behind her like a blessing. The illusion is perfect. As she sweeps past you, her face catches the light one last time. You swear it almost blinds you, a brilliance crafted from pain, painted on with purpose. The smell of vinegar and roses lingers, sharp and soft, ancient and new. You realize that in Elizabeth's world, hygiene isn't about removing dirt, it's about conquering decay. She doesn't wash it away, she outshines it. The afternoon court disperses slowly, leaving trails of laughter, perfume, and powdered dust behind. You follow Elizabeth as she withdraws once more into her privy chamber, where attendants wait with a sight both familiar and faintly unsettling, an array of combs, wigs, and bottles lined in a neat, fragrant row. The queen's natural hair, once golden red, has thinned and dulled with age, the price of decades beneath the crown. But she won't let anyone see weakness, not even in a stray strand. As the attendants remove her headpiece, a hush falls. The elaborate wig of poor bright, glinting with jewels, lifts free, revealing short, fine hair beneath, streaked with gray. For a moment, she looks almost human, almost ordinary. You can feel the tension in the room, everyone pretending not to notice the fragile, truth beneath the artifice. Wigs in Elizabeth's time are more than fashion, their strategy. Her reign begins amid scandal, rebellion, and rumor. A flawless appearance is a declaration of control. Her wigs, made from imported human hair and sometimes horsehair for volume, hair washed, curled, and perfumed with lavender oil. Each one is named the Flame, the Virgin's Veil, the Lion's Crown. The court whispers that she owns over 80. Historians still argue whether that number is exaggerated, but they all agree. No one in England used hair more politically than Elizabeth. Today, her favorite, the gleaming auburn phoenix, sits atop a wooden stand. The scent of starch and rose oil rises as the maids begin brushing it. Each hair is powdered with ground iris root and sometimes touched with sulfur powder, a crude attempt at lice prevention. The irony, of course, is that those same powders can irritate the scalp, turning self-care into slow torture. And lice, oh yes, they're everywhere. Even queens can't escape them. In an age when washing the head was rare, lice were simply another part of life, like gossip or taxes. The court dealt with them discreetly. Attendants used fine-toothed combs, often of ivory or boxwood, to sweep through hair daily. For ordinary people, that meant removing the little creatures by hand, sometimes cracking them between fingernails with a soft, audible pop. Don't worry, you're safe here in imagination. But yes, key, it was that vivid. Elizabeth's attendants, more refined, preferred to use scented oils as deterrents. Rosemary, thyme, and cedar oil are favorites, rubbed into combs and scalp alike. You can almost smell the earthy mixture as they work through her hair, gently teasing out knots. The queen keeps her eyes closed, serene, almost meditative. She's used to the ritual, the pull of the comb, the faint burn of oil, the murmur of her ladies gossiping softly in the background. It's a strangely intimate moment. For a woman who commands armies, this quiet grooming is her daily surrender. She can't comb her own hair. She can't clean her own headgear. Her body is a public project, maintained by others. That thought might unnerve you, but for her, it's simply the rhythm of rule. A court rumor half whispered, half-invented claims that Elizabeth occasionally burned her old wigs to destroy residual spirits. Sounds dramatic, but it's plausible. In Tudor superstition, personal items carried traces of the self. Hair, especially, was powerful. Better to burn a wig than risk it being stolen and used in witchcraft. And given that enemies accused her of everything from sorcery to vanity, you can understand the caution. When the attendants finish brushing the wig, they sprinkle it with perfumed powder starch tinted faintly with gold dust for shimmer. The air fills with a fine mist, almost glittering. You can feel it tickle your nose. That powder, by the way, has a life of its own. Get too close, inhale too much, and you're coughing for hours. Court life, it seems, came with occupational hazards. Once the wig is set upon her head again, the transformation is complete. The queen sits taller, her eyes brightening. Hair has always been power-ask any monarch. Hers burns like a banner, visible proof that she's still the virgin queen, untouched by time or defeat. It's no coincidence that she's depicted in portraits with hair fanning out like flames. Even her coiffure participates in the myth. But maintaining those wigs is no simple task. Between uses, they're stored in boxes lined with herbs to ward off moths and mold. On hot days, attendants hang them outdoors for airing a sight that must have amused passing servants. It's dozens of royal scalps fluttering in the breeze like trophies. You can imagine one of the laundry maids joking, the queen's taking the air again by proxy. There's another side to this ritual, though. Beneath all that pomp, Elizabeth suffers from scalp irritation. The combination of oils, starch, and sweat makes the skin itch. She scratches discreetly, her jeweled rings clicking against her temple. Her physician once suggested rubbing vinegar into her scalp to cool the humors. Logical in theory, painful in practice. You wince in sympathy as you picture it's the sting, the smell, the determination to endure. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth lost most of her hair due to smallpox scars, aging, or the corrosive cosmetics she used. Likely all three. What's certain is that she turned that vulnerability into image management. Where another woman might have hidden away, she doubled down, bigger wigs, brighter colors, more majesty. A lesson in public relations, centuries before spin doctors existed. And while the wigs draw admiration, the smell beneath them tells another story. Imagine the blend: hair oil, starch, sweat, lead powder. It's a Tudor cocktail that lingers in every corridor. Yet 2 courtiers, that scent becomes part of her aura. You don't question the fragrance of power. You adapt to it. One of her ladies, decades later, recalls that Elizabeth's hair was most sweet and cleanly kept. A polite lie, perhaps, but a loyal one. Cleanliness, in the Tudor sense, was measured by ritual, not reality. As long as the Queen's hurror, the illusion of it looked divine. It was. The last light fades from the window as the attendants finish their work. The Queen rises, inspecting her reflection one final time. Her wig gleams like a crown of living fire. You can almost believe it's real. Maybe, in some way, it is the material manifestation of her willpower as she walks past you. The air stirs, heavy with lavender and starch. The wig sways slightly, majestic and absurd all at once. Behind her, an attendant gathers stray hairs from the floor because, in this world, even a fallen strand of the Queen is dangerous, precious, or both. You breathe in that lingering scent of rosemary and iron, and for a fleeting second, you understand? Her hygiene rituals aren't just about cleanliness. They're about sovereignty. She refuses decay by rewriting it as ceremony. Each comb stroke, each powdered curl, is an act of defiance against mortality itself. Evening again, and the long tables of the presence chamber glimmer under candlelight. Silver platters, candied fruits, and goblets of spiced wine crowd every surface. You find yourself standing near the end of the royal table, watching Elizabeth bite delicately into a slice of preserved quince. Her teeth flash for just a moment in the flicker of flame and you realize that, up close, they aren't the pearls described in poetry. They're shadows of pearls, stained, uneven. The toll exacted by sugar. Sugar is the Tudor miracle and menace rolled into one sparkling crystal. Imported from the colonies, rarer than gold. It's a mark of wealth to have your food glitter with sweetness. Elizabeth adores. It comforts candied violets, marzipan sculptures shaped like castles. At banquets, she sometimes insists on sugar sculptures of her own image, as if to eat herself with the ultimate proof of power. Historians still argue whether the Queen's dental decay was severe or merely exaggerated by gossip, but the letters of visiting diplomats hint at blackened teeth. That didn't stop courtiers from copying her look. Some even darkened their own teeth to mimic royal fashion. Imagine choosing cavities as couture. Her apothecaries tried to keep pace. They mixed tooth powders of ground pumice and burnt rosemary, sometimes laced with salt or even crushed oyster shell. The Queen's attendants prepare a linen cloth, dip it in vinegar, and rub it gently across her teeth. You wince at the sound, the faint scrape, the sour hiss of vinegar, meeting enamel already softened by years of sugared banquets. Yet for her, this is maintenance, almost devotion. The Tudors equate sweet breath with virtue, and vinegar with cleansing. There's another layer of strangeness here. Dental surgery, if you can call it that, is performed by barbers. You picture one bustling into the palace with his leather pouch, smelling of soap, steel, and ale. He'll pull a royal tooth with the same hands that moments earlier shaved a nobleman's chin. No anesthetic, just courage and perhaps a swallow of fortified wine. The Queen, famously stoic, endures it with clenched dignity. One court rumor claims she once stuffed sweet cloths of rose honey between her gums afterward, both to soothe the wound and to perfume her breath. The irony drips thicker than the honey. Sugar causes the pain. Sugar heals it. Sugar covers the aftermath. Every taste is both pleasure and penalty. You can see why the modern world sometimes calls her the sweet-toothed queen. To mask any lingering odor, she'll choose clove, buds, and anise seeds, tiny bursts of spice that fill the chamber like incense. You might try to trick yourself next time you run out of toothpaste, but be warned, it's a strong flavor. Clove oil doubles as disinfectant, and Elizabeth's physicians prescribe it liberally. A clove chewed each morn keepeth foulness from the mouth, writes one of her doctors in a surviving note. Science and superstition, again walking hand in hand. At court, smell is diplomacy. The queen must never reek of sickness or decay. Her attendants prepare sweet bags, little pouches filled with dried herbs, to hang discreetly near her collar or sleeves. When she leans close to speak, the fragrance overwhelms any other trace. To the foreign ambassadors, she smells like roses and spice. They never know the battle being waged inside that perfect mouth. But make no mistake, Elizabeth isn't alone in this. 16th century England is a nation of aching gums. Sugar, once exotic, has become a craze. Nobles pile it on their plates to show wealth. Merchants stir it into wine to show ambition. Teeth across the realm darken together like an empire smiling itself into ruin. There's something poetic about that. You can stand the ache. Historians still argue whether the queen's dental state affected her speech. Some believe her later years brought stiffness to her jaw, her famous oratory softened by the discomfort of bad teeth. Others say she concealed it masterfully, her voice steady as ever. What's certain is that her attendants prepared endless mouthwashes wine mixed with alum and herbs to keep infection at bay. Whether they worked or simply stung her tongue into submission, no one can say. Imagine the scent that rises after she rinses wine. Spice, faint bitterness. It's almost pleasant until you remember what it hides. The queen's smile, immortalized in portraits, is carefully painted lips closed, demure. The artists know better than to open her mouth. Yet in private moments, she laughs freely. You see it now as one of her jesters performs, juggling apples carved into faces. She throws her head back, laughter ringing out bright and pure. For a heartbeat, the decay doesn't matter. She's radiant again, human and regal at once. You can almost forget the vinegar, the cloves, the endless ache. Then the moment passes. She takes another bite of candied orange peel, sighs contentedly, and reaches for her goblet. Sweet wine glimmers like molten amber. Her doctors frown silently in the background, but who would dare deny a queen her pleasure? If the price of sugar is pain, Elizabeth pays it gladly. You glance around at the courtiers. Some smile with identical, darkened teeth, proud badges of wealth. Others hide their mouths behind lace fans. The air itself hums with spice and decay. You can smell cinnamon, honey, and something faintly metallic like the ghost of iron. A stray thought crosses your mind. If dentists existed in Tudor England, they'd be the richest people in London. Instead, there are only apothecaries, barbers, and prayer. When pain flares too sharply, Elizabeth closes her eyes, murmuring that every queen must suffer for beauty and divine image. It's a mantra as old as monarchy itself. Still, she maintains her rituals with unwavering precision. Morning, vinegar rub. Noon, clove chewing. Evening, sweet wine rinse. It's not about vanity anymore, it's habit, control. A reminder that even pain can be ruled by discipline. As the feast winds down, servants clear the remains, sticky plates, half-eaten comfits, goblets rimmed with sugar crystals. The smell lingers, sweet and sharp, and you realize that this is another form of hygiene covering, rot with luxury, decay with opulence. Elizabeth's smile, however imperfect, remains part of her armor. She rises at last, leaving the hall in a swirl of velvet and perfume. The courtiers bow, teeth flashing dimly in the candlelight. In the fading echo of music and laughter, you can almost hear the crunch of sugar between royal molars of small. It's a gritty reminder that even queens to their own mortality. The palace grows quieter after supper, but not still. You trail Elizabeth into her private chambers again, where the night air carries the faint hum of insects and the steady crackle of tallow candles. The queen, weary yet restless, dismisses her attendants with a flick of her hand. It's time for her to cleanse a word that means something very different in her century than in yours. Bathing, to modern ears, sounds refreshing. But here, in Tudor England, water is not a friend. It's a menace, a vessel for disease. People believe that when hot water opens your pores, it lets illness slip inside. So the queen's so-called bath isn't about soaking nits, about scent and illusion. You watch as servants roll in a wooden tub, cupped, deep but narrow, lined with cloth soaked in scented vinegar. Steam rises faintly from a kettle poured into the basin, carrying the aroma of herbs, rosemary, thyme, and marjoram. The queen steps forward, shedding layers of silk and brocade until only a linen shift clings to her skin. Her body is pale under candlelight, the ghost of her own legend. The servants help her sit, the linen keeping her modesty intact, and she lowers herself into the herbal steam. The vinegar makes your eyes sting. The scent is sharp and earthy, like medicine. Elizabeth exhales slowly, her posture loosening, though her eyes remain open, always alert, even in ritual. This bath happens rarely, perhaps once a month. For daily hygiene, she prefers what her attendants call dry washing. A linen cloth soaked in rose water or spirits is rubbed across the body to lift sweat and perfume the skin. Think of it as the Tudor equivalent of wet wipes, but scented and ceremonial. When the queen performs it herself, it becomes almost an act of prayer. Cleanliness, after all, is divine order. She dips her hands into the steaming water, lifting them to her face. Droplets glisten on her pale skin, rolling down like tears of vinegar. You can almost feel the sting in the open pores beneath the lead mask residue. Still, she continues methodical.com. Hygiene for her isn't comfort. It's endurance disguised as grace. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not, or whether that lie, often quoted, was exaggerated by foreign observers. Some suggest she bathed more often than her peers, using small tubs and warmed linens. Others claim she clung to perfumes and powders, preferring dryness to immersion. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere damp, but not drenched, as she soaks. A servant approaches with a bowl of sweet waters, a mixture of distilled herbs and wine spirits. Elizabeth dips a cloth, wrings it carefully, and wipes her arms, her neck, her face. The act is both sensual and severe, each motion deliberate, cleansing not just skin, but memory. She murmurs softly, perhaps a prayer or a line from scripture. You catch fragments. Purify me, renew me. It's as though she's washing the burden of rule from her own hands. When she's done, another servant brings warmed linen towels. They pat her dry, not rub, never rub, for fear of bruising royal flesh. The towels smell faintly of smoke and lavender from the palace hearth. She shivers once, then straightens. Even the smallest tremor feels like rebellion against control. Nearby, a brazier glows. Over it sits a small pot of ointment, beeswax mixed with almond oil and a hint of myrrh. One of her attendants kneels and massages the salve into the queen's hands. The skin there is dry, cracked from constant washing with vinegar. The wax glistens, catching candlelight like polished amber. You imagine the warmth seeping into her joints, easing centuries of tension. And you almost sigh in sympathy. Then comes the perfume, the final step. Not the delicate spritz of modern times, but a deliberate fumigation. A pan of coals is placed beneath a silver sieve holding dried petals, cloves, and musk. Smoke curls upward, fragrant and thick. Elizabeth leans into it, letting the scent cling to her hair and gown. She closes her eyes, breathing deeply. The air becomes heavy with rose and spice, masking every trace of vinegar and skin. This is Tudor cleanliness, not the removal of dirt, but the triumph of scent over decay. The body isn't purified, it's disguised. You might even say deodorant begins here. With embers and imagination, a light joke floats to mind. You could call it the world's first spa day, except no cucumber slices, just vinegar burns and existential dread. But beneath the humor, there's something deeply human. The queen's ritual isn't just about appearance. It's about control in a world she can't fully master. Plagues, conspiracies, aging all beyond command. But her body, that she can order, scrubbed, perfumed, contained. When the servants removed the tub, they poured the remaining water into a drain at the edge of the room. The smell lingers, a mix of herbs and acid, oddly peaceful. You wonder how many times that same vinegar has touched her skin, how many times she's repeated this ritual, chasing purity in a world that fears it. Historians still debate whether the queen's fastidiousness was genuine or theatrical. Some letters suggest she reprimanded courtiers for smelling rank of man. Others say she tolerated filth at court so long as no one mentioned it aloud. Either way, she's a master of illusion of cleanliness, youth, and invincibility. Now, dressed again in a nightgown of fine linen, she sits before the hearth. The flicker of the fire softens her sharp features. For a brief moment, stripped of lead and wigs and statecraft, she seems almost peaceful, an old woman surrounded by warmth and scent. She lifts a silver cup to her lips, sipping wine laced with honey and rosemary. Her gaze drifts toward the window, where the moon glows faintly through the smoky glass. You follow her eyes, wondering if she ever feels trapped by her own rituals. Her whisper breaks the silence, almost too soft to catch. A clean body, a clean reign. The phrase sounds both sincere and ironic. You realize then that in her world, hygiene isn't about health, it's about hierarchy. Cleanliness is a mark of separation, proof she's not like her subjects, not subject to decay. Her perfume, her vinegar, her silence their armor. The coals dim, the scent fades, the queen's breathing slows. You stand there, surrounded by the ghosts of steam and herbs, knowing you've just witnessed something rare. A monarch, alone with her mortality, bathing not in water, but in denial, devotion, in the faint hope of eternal grace. Morning creeps back into Whitehall Palace like a cautious guest, pale and silent. You're standing once again in Elizabeth's private chambers, and today, the Queen's hygiene ritual involves something more intimate, and let's be honest, more awkward to discuss, the royal toilet routine. Not quite the stuff of epic ballads, okay? But if you've followed her this far through lead paint and vinegar baths, you might as well stay for the full, unfiltered picture. You glance around the room. There's no bathroom in the modern sense. Instead, a carved wooden chair sits discreetly behind a curtain, its seat cut with an oval opening. Beneath it a removable pewter bowl lined with linen and scented herbs. This, dear listener, is the royal clothes stool, and it's about as close to plumbing as the 16th century gets. The Queen's personal groom of the stool stands nearby, a man of astonishing dignity given his rather undignified job. His duties go far beyond what the title suggests. He manages her household accounts, her private correspondence, and these her bodily needs. Serving as groom of the stool is considered an honor because it means proximity, intimate proximity. If you think about it too long, it's both absurd and profoundly revealing in this world. Even hygiene is political. The Queen uses the stool daily, usually in private, though private here means at least one attendant within earshot. The linen inside the bowl is sprinkled with herbs, mint, rose petals, dried thyme to mask odor. A servant nearby holds a small vessel of water mixed with vinegar for rinsing afterward. The whole process is conducted with brisk efficiency and absolute silence. You almost hold your breath watching it out of respect or maybe sympathy. And it's not just her. The entire Tudor court runs on this system. Servants carry portable chamber pots from room to room. They're emptied into the palace privies, which are essentially chutes leading to brick cesspits. When those fill, someone usually not of noble rank must climb down and shovel them out. Imagine the smell in midsummer. Actually, Tone, even the Thames nearby can't drown that stench. Historians still argue about just how bad the palace odor truly was. Some claim that Elizabeth insisted on herbs and rushes to freshen the air, replaced weekly. Others suggest that Whitehall's privies leaked into the walls, perfuming the corridors with something less divine. The truth probably lies somewhere between unpleasant and eye-watering. Elizabeth herself, though, is particular. Her chambers are perfumed constantly with incense or sweet bags. Her close stool is emptied immediately after each use, scrubbed with vinegar and relined. When she travels, her portable stool folding and velvet cushion travels with her, packed as carefully as the crown jewels. You can picture it bumping along the road to Windsor, attended by servants sworn to discretion, the throne that follows the throne. Now, let's pause to appreciate the awkward brilliance of this setup. You might think the Queen's most powerful ministers earned her confidence through politics or poetry. In truth, it's the man who handles her stool who hears her unguarded sighs, her half-muttered thoughts. There's an intimacy in vulnerability, and Elizabeth's court runs on precisely that ritualized intimacy disguised as duty. A light joke sneaks into your mind. If modern politicians had such a position, imagine the security clearance required. Sir Francis, level stool, access only. Once finished, Elizabeth washes her hands in a small basin filled with rose water. The linen towel is warmed by the fire, and she dries herself delicately, dabbing rather than rubbing. She then dips her fingers into a tiny jar of civet musk ointment. The musky perfume, derived from the glands of the civet cat, was wildly fashionable and divisive. To some, it smelled heavenly. To others, like a damp animal disguised as royalty. But the Queen adores it. A single dab behind each ear, and the royal aura is restored. It's strange, watching this collision of elegance and earthiness. You expect glamour, but what you see instead is precision ritual made out of necessity. Even something as mundane as using the toilet becomes a controlled performance, timed, perfumed, and polished. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's obsession with cleanliness was rooted in fear of disease or simply vanity. Some letters suggest she scolded attendants for lax chamber maintenance. Others describe her palace as perpetually fragrant with incense, though the sweet smoke may have been less about beauty and more about survival. After all, Tudor doctors believed disease traveled through miasma or bad air. To breathe roses was to defy death. And yet, despite all the herbs and smoke, the Queen still faces the same human frailties as everyone else. Constipation, for instance, is a frequent visitor in Tudor households, diet heavy in meat, light on fiber. Her physicians prescribe remedies, prune syrup, rhubarb powder, and the ever-faithful electuary of senna, a sticky mix of laxative herbs blended with honey. If the medicine fails, there's always the fallback and enema syringe made of silver. A tool best left undescribed in detail if you value your dreams tonight. You can't help but smile at the irony. The monarch who commands fleets and fates is also at war with her own digestion, but she handles it as she handles everything with grace and delegation. When the ritual is complete, the stool is carried away, covered with linen. The chambermaids move swiftly, their faces blank masks of composure. They've done this countless times, but they never meet her gaze. There's an unspoken understanding. What passes in this chamber, quite literally, stays in this chamber. The Queen returns to her writing table, composed once more. Her letters await dispatches to ambassadors, commands to the Navy, a note to the Archbishop perhaps. Her quill glides smoothly, her hand steady. The woman who moments ago was a body of aches and odors is again the voice of empire. That seamless transition is her genius. You notice the faintest scent, still lingering a mix of rosewater and civet, sharp yet strangely comforting. Beneath it, the faint earthy trace of vinegar. It's not unpleasant, just human. For the first time, you feel something like tenderness for her. This woman who spends her life pretending not to be flesh as she seals her letter with wax. She glances toward the curtained stool and murmurs, "A throne must be emptied as well as filled." A joke? A confession? Hard to tell. Her attendants don't laugh. They know better, but you almost do. It's the most honest line you've heard all day. She stands, straightens her collar, and steps back into the light of her court, leaving behind the faint scent of roses, musk, and something far older, the unbreakable reminder that even monarchs answer nature's call. Mid-morning sunlight spills through the palace windows, gilding the dust motes in lazy motion. You stand at the edge of Elizabeth's privy chamber again, and today the queen's focus isn't her skin or her hair or her dainty porcelain smile amidst her clothes. You can tell by the bustle of attendants that this will take a while. Dozens of hands flutter around her like industrious birds, layering silk upon linen upon more silk until she vanishes beneath her own legend. If cleanliness begins at the skin, Elizabeth's version starts with the first barrier against it, the linen shift, freshly laundered, faintly damp from its final rinse in rosewater and lye. It's her invisible armor. Linen is prized for absorbing sweat, though fresh in Tudor England is a flexible word. Laundresses scrub each piece in wooden tubs with ash soap, then beat it with paddles and hang it near the fire to dry. The smoke gives every garment a faint woody scent that the court will later mistake for perfume. You can almost smell its sashes, its lavender, a whisper of sweat that never truly leaves. Her maid slides the shift over the queen's head, the fabric whispering against her skin. Elizabeth shivers slightly. It's not the cold, it's the ritual. She's done this every day for more than 40 years. Each layer will serve a purpose: to absorb, to protect, to shape. Hygiene by architecture. Historians still argue whether the queen changed her underclothes daily or only when they seemed unclean. Some claim she was fastidious, others that she economized on effort and water alike. Either way, laundry is a monumental operation. Whitehall's laundresses work from dawn till dusk, boiling, rinsing, and starching. The starch, made from wheat flour and water, stiffens collars and ruffs until they stand like halos around the neck. Too much starch, however, turns sour and attracts one of those tiny, itchy ironies history never mentions in the portraits. Now comes the corset pair of bodies, as it's called. Two maids tug the laces until Elizabeth exhales sharply. Her waist compresses. Her spine straightens. The corset is made of whalebone and leather, lined with canvas that smells faintly of oil and human heat. You wince in sympathy. She doesn't. Pain is just posture by another name. Her petticoats follow several layers of heavy wool or silk, depending on the season. They rustle like leaves in wind. Then the farthingale, a hoop of cane or steel that spreads the gown into its signature bell shape. Beneath all this, her body nearly disappears, cocooned in textile discipline. Hygiene, in this context, means isolation. The queen's flesh must never mingle with the air of common life. One of her ladies sprinkles, a powder of dried orris root and ground roses between the layers to keep them fragrant. It works, though you can't help imagining the powder mixing with sweat through long court days, forming what modern historians might politely call historical residue. A light joke drifts in this dry shampoo had a medieval ancestor. This would be it, except with the bonus risk of spontaneous combustion if you stand too close to a candle. Elizabeth's outer gown is a masterpiece of embroidery and polish. Silver thread catches every movement, and jewels glint like stars trapped in cloth. You watch her study herself in the mirror, checking each fold. She isn't merely dressing. She's assembling the nation. Every bead, every pleat communicates power, wealth, and crucially distance. There's a faint irony here. Beneath the perfume and pearl, her underlayers are often damp. Heavy clothing traps heat and moisture without daily washing. The queen and her courtiers rely on constant linen changes and herbal sachets to refresh themselves. When a lady-in-waiting leans close to adjust Elizabeth's collar, you catch the competing fragrances of musk, lavender, and human effort. It's not unpleasant, just honest. Historians still debate whether the famous royal laundry was was truly perfumed with imported soaps, or merely scented afterward to disguise the residue of lye and sweat. Either way, the Queen's attendants go through mountains of linen each month. The royal accounts list pounds of soap, barrels of ashes, and fields of lavender harvested purely for laundry use. Imagine the workforce. Women bent over tubs, arms raw from lye, scrubbing the illusion of purity into cloth that will never truly be clean. The Queen's ruff is the crowning detail. Stiff, perfect, deadly sharp at the edges. The starch used to shape it is applied hot and then ironed with heated glass rods process that occasionally sets fabric alight. You watch the laundress handle it with trembling precision, as if cradling a live ember. When she fastens it around Elizabeth's neck, it flares like a frozen wave, magnificent and mildly suffocating. Elizabeth adjusts it herself, fingertips brushing the lace. Too near the throat, Mistress Perry, she murmurs. The maid blushes, corrects, and steps back. The Queen smiles faintly, satisfied. Her reflection now shows no trace of weakness, no hint of the vinegar baths or cracked skin beneath. She looks every inch eternal, but eternity, as always, has a price. Those layers trap heat. The stiff corset bruises ribs. The starch irritates skin. Beneath the glamour, Elizabeth's body bears the quiet cost of representation. You imagine the marks she'll find later when undressing, the red lines across her shoulders, the raw patches beneath her stays. And yet, she never complains. In her world, discomfort is proof of discipline. Her garments smell faintly of lavender, smoke, an Iruna trifecta of the Tudor aesthetic, clean by perception, not by purity. There's a quirk you might appreciate. Elizabeth reportedly kept small dogs near her skirts during audiences, lap dogs that provided warmth and unintentionally flea control. Their constant presence supposedly drew parasites away from human skin. Whether it worked or not, historians still argue. You can imagine the little creatures darting in and out beneath layers of silk, living, breathing accessories to hygiene and affection. A second light joke surfaces you. Realize the Queen may have been the first to practice pet-based pest management. Not quite the luxury brand it sounds like, but effective enough for her court. When her dressing is done, the attendants step back. The room falls silent for a moment, as if the act of dressing a monarch were a kind of mass held in cloth and breath. The Queen lifts her chin. The jewels catch sunlight again, and the illusion is complete. She glows, spotless, untouchable. You almost forget the sweat trapped under linen, the faint itch beneath the corset, the smoky tang of lye still clinging to the cloth. Almost as she glides past, the air stirs with a layered fragrance of rose starch, and something indefinable in aroma that is not quite clean, not quite dirty, the smell of power itself. You watch her go, skirts sweeping across the wooden floor, and think of what cleanliness means to her. It's not soap and water. It's order, control, separation. To be clean is to be above, and you realize with a small, wry smile, no one in England is cleaner or dirtier than the Queen. The morning court has ended, and sunlight fades into the gauzy gold of early afternoon. You follow Elizabeth down a long corridor lined with portraits of her ancestors' stern faces, many of them crowned, most of them dead far too soon. She passes them without a glance. You know why? There's one subject she avoids at all costs. And today, you're going to see why: her health, her physicians, and the strange, sometimes disgusting treatments that pass for Tudor medicine. A faint cough echoes through the chamber as she sits, a sound she tries to disguise with a delicate handkerchief. Her physician, Dr. Burkett, hovers nearby with a tray of remedies, glass vials, brass spoons, powders, and something that smells faintly of decay. Welcome to the Queen's medical routine, half alchemy, half prayer, entirely stomach dash, turning dot to understand this part of Elizabeth's hygiene. You must remember that clean in her time means balance. The four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile govern every body. Too much of any one, and disease creeps in. Too little, and the body withers. The Queen's doctors measure her wellness not by germs, a concept centuries away, but by temperament, her heat, her moisture, her mood. Dr. Burkett begins by taking her pulse, not with a stethoscope, of course, just fingers pressed against her wrist, counting silently while watching her face. He nods solemnly and declares her humors slightly overheated. Its translation: she's stressed, maybe constipated, or just existing while female in the 1500s. The cure: purge and balance. Always purge and balance. The Queen's attendants bring forward a small silver cup of syrup of rhubarb thick. Dark concoction meant to open the bowels. Smells of sugar and spice, but hides a potent laxative core. Elizabeth sips it without complaint, though her expression tightens. A monarch can't wince in public. You wonder whether she secretly loathes this taste, or whether by now she's forgotten to notice. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly feared physicians or merely distrusted their methods. Some letters hint that she delayed medical visits until absolutely necessary. Others show her carefully approving new remedies brought from Italy or Spain. What's certain is that she preferred control, even over illness. Her body was not to be prodded, bled, or examined more than dignity allowed. Still, when illness struck, she submitted 2 treatments that would horrify you today. One of her more common therapies involves cupping, glass bowls heated and pressed to the skin to draw blood to the surface. You imagine the sound: a hiss, a soft pop, the Queen's controlled breathing as her back models with red circles. It's meant to draw out toxins. Whether it helps or just bruises is anyone's guess. Another favorite: bloodletting. A physician's lancet, sharp and slender, used to release a small amount of blood from her arm. The belief is simple: too much blood means fever. Less blood, more balance. The Queen's veins have been opened more than once, though she insists on doing it discreetly, away from prying eyes. The waste bowl afterward is covered immediately with a cloth. Royal blood, even spilled, is sacred. Then there are the poultices compresses of bread, vinegar, and herbs applied to the skin to draw out heat when her joints ache. Her attendants smear a paste of mustard seed and goose fat around her knees. When she's pale, they offer tonics laced with gold dust, believing precious metals strengthen the spirit. You can almost taste the alchemy. It's heavy and metallic in the air. And let's not forget the most notorious of all Tudor remedies: urine. Yes, you heard that right. In Elizabeth's day, urine is considered diagnostic and curative. Physicians examine its color, its scent, its weight. It's clear, and you're weak. Too dark, and your humors are boiling. Sometimes they even recommend bathing minor wounds in it too owned, ideally fresh. There are reports that Elizabeth's apothecaries prepared such water of health, though whether she ever used it personally is debated. You sincerely hope not, but this is the 16th century where the things have happened. A light joke stirs you. Could say Tudor doctors practiced streaming diagnostics long before modern science. The Queen herself maintains a small cabinet of personal remedies: bottles of rose syrup for sore throats, lozenges of licorice and sugar, and a prized vial of ambergris oil, which she applies behind her ears to stave off infection. The scent, salty and musky, fills the room, derived from whale secretion. It's prized as both perfume and medicine. You find yourself weirdly grateful. The room doesn't come with smell-o-vision. Historians still argue about Elizabeth's later health. Did she suffer mercury poisoning from her cosmetics, lead poisoning from her cerus, or was it just the slow toll of exhaustion? In her final years, witnesses describe her as increasingly frail, plagued by headaches and melancholy. Her doctors, desperate to help, prescribed tricla, mixture of herbs, wine, and sometimes powdered viper. It comforts the heart and purges the poison, one physician wrote proudly. Whether it worked is questionable. Whether it disgusted is beyond debate. Yet, despite all this, Elizabeth remains impressively resilient. Perhaps sheer willpower keeps her upright, or perhaps her faith in ritual, her nightly baths, her morning perfumes, her endless control serves as medicine enough. You can almost believe it. As her physician packs away his instruments, she thanks him curtly. There's a pause. Then she reaches for a silver mirror and studies her reflection. Still alive, doctor, she says softly, and still clean. The words hover between pride and mockery. You notice the faint yellow stains on her fingertips from the herbal ointments she handles herself. Even the queen bears the marks of her own remedies. Her attendants wipe her hands with rose water, the liquid catching candlelight like molten rubies. The smell rises against sweet, medicinal, eternal. One of the maids brings in a sprig of rosemary to burn in the chamber. The queen approves. Smoke curls upward, soft and fragrant. In Tudor medicine, rosemary purifies the air and the spirit. For a moment, the room feels lighter. You can't help but marvel beneath all the superstition. There's logic trying to crawl free. The queen's hygiene rituals, vinegar, herbs, perfumes, aren't far from real sanitation, just misunderstood. She's not entirely wrong. She's just centuries early. A final joke whispers in your thoughts. If she had a modern pharmacy, she'd probably still demand it smell like roses and whale musk. Some habits die harder than monarchs. As evening approaches, her physician bows and withdraws. The queen remains seated, her hand resting lightly over her heart. Her eyes close for a moment, weary but satisfied. Around her, the air hums with rosemary smoke, the faint echo of ritual and resilience, and you realize something simple, profound, and maybe a little sad. Elizabeth's hygiene isn't about cleanliness or health anymore. It's about control over decay. Her body is her kingdom, and every purge, every powder, every absurd cure is an act of governance. When she finally opens her eyes again, they gleam with iron will and faint fatigue. She smiles. No plague yet, she murmurs. God must favor the scrubbed. You're not sure whether to laugh or shiver. The queen has taken her midday meal light by her standards and retired to her chambers again. But this time, instead of staying by her side, you drift behind the scenes, down into the warm, smoky belly of the palace where the true work of hygiene happens. It smells of damp linen, wet wood, and lye soap. Welcome to the world of Elizabeth's Laundresses. Here, beneath the elegance of court, you discover the hidden labor that keeps the illusion of royal cleanliness alive. It's easy to imagine the queen's shimmering gowns and fresh linen shifts as effortless luxuries. But every spotless cuff and crisp ruff comes from this steamy, back-breaking workshop. The women who work here never see sunlight except through soot-blurred windows. Their hands are red and cracked, their sleeves rolled high, their hair tied back in kerchiefs that once were white. They are the ghost hands of Elizabeth's hygiene. Steam rises from great copper cauldrons, where linen soaks in scalding water thickened with lye. One woman stirs the pot with a paddle nearly her height. The mixture hisses and spits like an impatient cauldron in a witch's story. You feel the sting of heat on your skin. Another worker beats soaked sheets against wooden boards to loosen the grime. It's not dainty work, it's war. Soap is precious, and even for a queen. Every batch must be stretched to its limit. The recipe hasn't changed in centuries. It's ashes from burned wood mixed with animal fat. The result cleans surprisingly well, but leaves everything smelling faintly of smoke and bacon. A light joke slips in, you realize Elizabeth's freshly laundered. Scent might have been closer to breakfast than to roses. When the washing's done, the women rinse everything with buckets of cold water hauled from a nearby cistern. The chill would make your teeth chatter, but no one hesitates. Linen is then wrung shaken and hung before roaring fires or in palace courtyards where it flutters like banners of surrender. If the weather turns foul, the laundry steams indoors, transforming whole corridors into fog. The queen might be miles away, but her world smells perpetually of wet fabric and ash. Historians still argue if Elizabeth's linens were boiled or merely steeped. Boiling risked shrinking expensive fabric, but it killed lice and fleas more reliably. Given her obsession with dignity, you suspect she allowed the risk. After all, what's a few inches off a shift compared to a bite from a parasite? Once dry, the linen moves to starching. The starch mixture, made from wheat flour, is cooked until thick, then strained through fine cloth. Each ruff, cuff, and collar is dipped, wrung, and dried flat before being ironed smooth with glass or metal rods heated in coals. The smell of scorched flour fills the air, cozy at first, then cloying. You watch one laundress handle a ruff with reverence, smoothing every pleat like a priestess arranging relics. They talk quietly among themselves about the weather, about their aching backs, about the queen. She must be the cleanest woman alive, one murmurs, and the others laugh softly. They know better. Cleanliness is relative. If the queen's body is sacred, these women perform the sacraments. Above them, courtiers lounge beneath perfumed fans. Down here, the perfume is sweat and lie. Yet the bond between upstairs and downstairs is unbreakable. Each spotless gown paraded through court is proof of invisible toil below. Occasionally, Elizabeth herself acknowledges it. There are records of her sending small gift coins, ribbons, leftover perfume to her laundresses. Whether gratitude or strategy, no one can say. The royal linen must never rebel. In a corner of the laundry room sits an old woman named Agnes, her fingers curled like claws from years of wringing. She's the starch mistress, the final guardian of the queen's image. She takes a stiff ruff and dusts it lightly with orris powder, giving it a ghostly shimmer. Too much starch cracks the lace, she says, to no one in particular. Then Her Majesty scolds. You sense a hint of pride in her voice. After all, she's starched for a queen. Her apprentice snickers. And if it burns, Agnes shrugs. Then we pray she has another. You smile, despite yourself. The line between reverence and resignation is thin here by afternoon. Piles of clean linen are bundled into baskets and hoisted upstairs. Servants will fold them, scent them with herbs, and store them in cedar chests to keep away moths. Each chest bears a tag for the queen's shift, for the bed of estate, for privy use. There's a hierarchy of cleanliness, even in cloth. The shift touches skin. The bed holds dreams. The rest serves ceremony. Historians still argue how often Elizabeth replaced her bedding. Some say weekly, others only as need required. Given the warmth of her chambers and the density of her draperies, you'd vote for the former, though need might mean visible discomfort, not invisible microbes. Its laundry extends beyond fabric. Brushes, combs, and basins must also be kept sweet. Servants rinse combs in vinegar water, scrub mirrors with wool, polish silver basins until they reflect like miniature moons. Even chamber pots get attention. They're emptied, rinsed with vinegar, and sprinkled with aromatic herbs like mint or marjoram. You note that most of these herbs have mild antibacterial properties, though no one knows that word yet. They just know mint smells cleaner than people. A light choke surfaces, you realize. Tudor sanitation was less kill the germs and more convince the nose. Every part of this system relies on labor invisible to the eyes of the powerful. The laundresses, scullions, and cleaners are the true custodians of the queen's myth. Without them, the virgin queen's image, pure, radiant, immaculate, would reek of reality. It's strange, isn't it? The higher you rise, the more people must scrub behind you. As twilight nears, the laundry fires die down. The women hang their aprons, flex sore fingers, and share a crust of bread near the coals. Their laughter is weary but genuine. One hums a hymn under her breath, a melody that echoes faintly through the palace floorboards. Above them, Elizabeth sits at her writing desk, quill in hand, composing letters to foreign princes. She smells faintly of orris, rosewater, and starch, the distilled result of their day's work. The floor between them might as well be the world. You take one last look at the steaming cauldrons, the heaps of folded linen glowing in firelight. It strikes you that these women will never see the queen wear their work, but they'll know by scent when she does. The fragrance of lye, lavender, and effort will rise through the palace like invisible incense, in a way. This is Elizabeth's truest hygiene secret. Not her perfumes, not her lead powders, but the quiet, relentless rhythm of hands that never rest. When you surface back into the queen's chamber, she's already in a fresh shift, reading by candlelight. She looks serene, spotless, divine. You smile, knowing it's an illusion built from steam, sweat, and sacrifice. And somewhere below, Agnes and her girls are already heating water for tomorrow. The fire crackles in the queen's private chamber, and outside, the night air smells faintly of spice and rain. The court has long since quieted, and you find Elizabeth surrounded not by courtiers tonight, but by curiosities, small jars, ornate boxes, and packets wrapped in parchment. The glow from the hearth dances across glass bottles filled with shimmering powders and exotic oils. This, you realize, is another side of her hygiene. The global side, Tudor England, is opening to the world. And the Queen's toilette mirrors that expansion. Sugar from the Caribbean, cinnamon from Ceylon, musk from Asia, amber from the Baltic, all ends up here. Inner chambers transformed into medicine, beauty, and, occasionally, odor control. She opens one small jar, and the scent hits you instantly, sharp and sweet, unmistakably clove. For the breath, she murmurs, almost conspiratorially. A clove-studded orange, called a pomander, sits on the table beside her. It's both ornament and hygiene tool, believed to ward off plague and bad smells alike. You recall from earlier how she used to carry one hidden in her palm during audiences, a subtle shield between her royal nose and the less fragrant reality of court life. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's reliance on imported luxuries was medical, fashionable, or simply theatrical. Probably all three. In an age when cleanliness and holiness blurred together, exotic goods carry divine promise. If something comes from far away, it must be powerful. Take sugar, for instance. You think of it now as ordinary, but to Elizabeth, it's nearly sacred. Sweetness equals sophistication. Her apothecaries grind it into powders and mix it with herbs to make lozenges and toothpaste, if you can call them that. They polish teeth, mask breath, and destroy enamel all at once. Some court chroniclers even note her teeth grew blackened and unsound later in life, a badge of wealth rather than shame. If your mouth sparkles with decay, it means you've had more sugar than anyone else. A light joke creeps in, you imagine. Modern dentists fainting at the sight of the Queen's grin, only to be reassured that black is the new clean. Spices, too, serve double duty. The Queen's chamber is rarely without a faint haze of burning frankincense or myrrh. The smoke drifts lazily upward, disguising the smell of sweat and candle wax. More importantly, it's believed to sweeten the air and drive away illness. In the age before germ theory, disease rides on foul odors, the infamous miasma. Clean air equals health. Spices aren't luxury here. They're defense mechanisms. You notice a servant grinding cinnamon and nutmeg into a fine powder, mixing it with vinegar and honey to make a tonic for the stomach. The Queen swears by it. It's as close to probiotics as Tudor medicine gets, though she'd never call it that. Another servant adds saffron to her evening bathwater, less for cleanliness, more for its golden hue, said to bless the skin and strengthen the heart. Historians still debate the origins of some of these recipes. Were they truly medicinal, Or were they gifts from foreign diplomats meant to flatter her vanity? A Spanish ambassador once presented her with a jar of oil of Ben, extracted from the seeds of the moringa tree. It smelled faintly of almonds and promised eternal youth. She reportedly used it sparingly, keeping it hidden from curious courtiers. Even her cosmetics reflect global trade. The famous white ceruse may be local lead and vinegar, key, but the rouge that tints her cheeks comes from cochineal beetles imported from the Americas. Imagine that, tiny crushed insects traveling across oceans just to give the queen a healthy flush. You try not to picture it too vividly. A faint chuckle rises in your throat. Who knew eco-friendly makeup once meant harvested from bugs? The queen's fascination with foreign hygiene doesn't stop at beauty. She owns a small collection of oriental toothsticks, thin, aromatic twigs from the Middle East, used to clean the teeth. She's seen portraits of Ottoman sultans holding them with regal poise, and naturally, she must try. One evening, she asks a courtier, "Does this make me appear learned or foolish?" The courtier wisely answers, "Majesty, it makes you appear immortal." She keeps the sticks afterward, perhaps convinced they lend a touch of eternal glamour. You can almost see her, late at night, chewing gently on a perfumed twig while dictating letters, half hygiene, half habit. Even the queen's garments tell tales of empire. Her chemises are lined with silks from Italy. Her gloves are scented with ambergris from the Atlantic. Every thread, every drop of oil connects England to the world. The illusion of purity she maintains depends on global commerce, hundreds of hands, thousands of miles. Endless lives unseen. There's a fringe tidbit here that always amuses historians. One of Elizabeth's ambassadors once sent her scented crocodile dung from Egypt, supposedly for skincare. The queen accepted it graciously, though whether she actually used it remains a mystery. You hope not? Still, it's a fitting metaphor for Tudor luxury where beauty and horror often share the same jar. Her physicians, of course, treat these imports with cautious awe. To them, spices and sugars are medicines, not delicacies. They prescribe cinnamon for digestion, nutmeg for melancholy, cloves for toothache. The queen, pragmatic as ever, takes the best of both worlds. She eats her medicine and perfumes her air with it. A third joke bubbles up, you realize. Elizabeth might have pioneered the idea of self-care Sundays, except hers involved whale perfume, bug blush, and cinnamon vinegar shots. Wellness influencers would have adored her. Yet, beneath all this glamour lies something genuine: curiosity. The queen's hygiene rituals aren't blind superstition. They're experiments in a world fumbling toward science. She believes the senses can heal, that beauty has moral weight, that the body and the realm mirror each other. If England smells sweet, the queen must smell sweeter. The scent of her chamber now is dizzying rose, musk, cinnamon, amber, and that faint underlying tang of human fatigue. You inhale carefully, half enchanted, half overwhelmed. It's the smell of power distilled into perfume. Historians still argue what role this olfactory empire played in her legend. Did the queen's scent truly charm ambassadors, or did it simply drown out the stench of old palaces and anxious courtiers? Either way, result is the same. Elizabeth doesn't just rule through words or war, she rules through smell. As the fire burns low, she leans back in her chair, eyes closed, breathing in her own creation. Around her, the imported luxuries gleam like relics. The world has come to her feet, and she has turned it into soap, powder, and sugar. You realize that in this dim, fragrant room, hygiene becomes alchemia, royal act of transformation. Sweat becomes perfume. Decay becomes devotion. The queen herself becomes the empire's cleanest contradiction. And tomorrow morning, she'll wake, sip spiced wine, and begin the ritual all over again. You can almost feel the tension before it reaches the palace. Rumors have a way of slipping under doors faster than any draft. Even now, as Elizabeth reclines in her chair, The air seems charged with invisible whispers. Courtiers trade gossip like currency, and tonight's topic is her favorite enemy herself, her hygiene, her beauty, her body, are fair game for political theater. You see, in Tudor England, a queen's reputation is never her own. Her skin, her scent, her supposed cleanliness are as public as her policies. To adore her is to defend her purity. To attack her is to soil it, so naturally. The enemies of the Virgin Queen Catholics abroad, rivals at home. Jealous courtiers with bruised egos turn her habits into weapons. One rumor claims she hasn't bathed in years. Another says her rooms reek of stale perfume and rotting teeth. There's even a tale that her attendants must scrape her skin to remove built-up grime, as one would scrape wax from a candle. It's ludicrous, but irresistible. The same tongues that praise her beauty whisper that the beauty is paint, that the purity is powder, that beneath the layers lies decay. Historians still argue whether these rumors came from jealous courtiers or deliberate propaganda. What's certain is that they worked foreign ambassadors often reported conflicting impressions of the queen's appearance, some describing her as radiant, others as a corpse adorned. Truth and myth blurred into one perfumed cloud. You imagine Elizabeth hearing one of these rumors? At first, perhaps she laughs. She's lived her entire life as theater. She understands the value of spectacle. If they gossip, she might say, then I still ruled their thoughts. But later, alone, maybe she feels the sting. Not because it's untrue, but because it might be half true. She adjusts her ruff in the mirror, that eternal shield of lace, and you see a flicker of fatigue. Her beauty regimen Ciro's vinegar, perfumes keeps her radiant, but exacts a price. The lead slowly saps her vitality. The perfumes irritate her lungs. To some, this physical cost becomes metaphor. England herself is fair and fading, writes one poet perhaps, too poetically for his own safety. A light joke drifts in you. Think of how modern tabloids would have adored her. Queen's secret stench exposed. Experts blame crocodile cream. Elizabeth, ever aware of image, begins to counterattack with her own stagecraft. She increases her public appearances, ensuring she's seen in dazzling light. Surrounded by incense, her presence overpowering. If her scent fills the air, no one can claim she smells of decay. She transforms hygiene into propaganda. During one famous progressive royal roadshow through England, she visits a small village and is greeted by a woman, offering a posy of flowers to sweeten the air. The queen takes it graciously and laughs. Good wife, the air is sweet already, for I am here. The crowd roars. The rumor evaporates, but not for long. Across the channel, Catholic pamphleteers depict her as a monstrous virgin, a painted hag who tricks her people with cosmetics and perfume. One French writer describes her as a woman of foul habits and fouler conscience. You roll your eyes at propaganda. Yes, but the venom is personal. In an age obsessed with bodily morality, cleanliness equals holiness. To call her filthy is to call her damned. Historians still debate how aware Elizabeth was of these foreign libels. Some letters suggest she demanded translations, reading them aloud to her ladies with theatrical disgust. Others say she simply laughed and burned them. Either way, she knew their power and the necessity of control, and control she maintained ruthlessly. The court chronicler who dared to describe her aging face too frankly was dismissed. Portraits were censored, retouched, improved. Official artists received strict orders. No wrinkles, no dark teeth, no blemishes. Paint me as you must paint the sun, she once commanded. And they did. The result, immortal youth. Hygiene by illusion. Behind closed doors, though, the reality is harder to polish. Her attendants whisper about the constant need to reapply cosmetics, the irritation around her eyes, the dryness of her lips. Her linen collars must be replaced often. Sweat and lead don't mix well. You picture her late at night, wiping her face with rose water, staring into the mirror as if daring time itself to answer back. A faint smile plays on her lips. Still spotless, she murmurs. One of her maids, braver than most, once wrote that the queen's chambers smelt always of roses and vinegar, and of something else I could not name. It's that unnamed something, that subtle undercurrent of humanity's, what her enemies twist into disgust. They imagine her body as monstrous precisely because she refuses to let it be merely female. And yet, there's a strange irony here. By vilifying her hygiene, they immortalize her. No one remembers the kings who washed daily. Everyone remembers the queen who didn't. Her supposed filth becomes a legend, her odor a myth, her body an argument about power. A second light joke bubbles up. You realize Elizabeth might be the only person in history to turn smells weird into a political strategy. Still, rumors have a way of lingering. Decades later, foreign diplomats write to their courts about her fading beauty. One describes her as waxen and painted, but still majestic. Another calls her as bright as candlelight before it gutters. They mean it as insult, but it reads like poetry. Historians still argue whether her final years were truly as grim as gossip claims. Did her skin crack from cosmetics? Did her hair fall out beneath her wigs? No one knows for certain, but the symbolic truth remains. She wore her artifice like armor, daring anyone to see the woman beneath. As the years pass, the queen's self-control becomes absolute. She forbids mirrors in her later chambers, relying on her ladies to tell her what reflection would reveal. Her beauty, once weapon, becomes ghost, but she continues her rituals, the perfumes, the powders, the clean linens, perhaps not out of vanity anymore, but habit. The act itself is survival. A third joke drifts in quietly. You could say she invented maintenance mode, except hers required alchemists instead of moisturizers. Tonight, though, you see her unguarded for a moment. The candles burn low. Her face gleams pale, almost spectral. Around her, the scent of amber and vinegar mingles with the faint trace of exhaustion. She's lived half a century as England's embodiment, pure, fragrant. Eternal land. Now the performance weighs heavy, but when a servant knocks, she straightens instantly. "Enter," she says, her tone slicing the silence. The mask reforms. The queen of cleanliness, of beauty, of composure. No rumor, no whisper, no candlelight can undo it. You realize something profound as you watch her smile, that perfect, painted smile. In the battle between truth and image, Elizabeth never loses. Even her supposed filth is curated, deliberate, legendary. And when she turns her head, the faint shimmer of powder dusts the air like holy mist. The palace is quieter now. The courtiers who once filled its galleries with laughter and intrigue have grown old or gone home. You stand outside Elizabeth's chamber, and even the air feels slower, gentler, if time itself tiptoes in deference. Inside, the queen sits alone at her table. The mirror she once commanded to tell flattering lies is now veiled in black silk. She doesn't need to see her reflection. She knows it by memory. The powdered skin, the darkened teeth, the delicate hands that have signed treaties, pardons, and death warrants. The performance of purity has become her second skin. A brazier glows softly nearby, releasing faint wisps of sweet-smelling smoke. Even now, she clings to her perfume's rose and ambergris perhaps, less to seduce or impress, and more to comfort herself. The scent is her shield, her identity. Beneath it lies the woman the world was never allowed to see. Her ladies move quietly, bathing her hands in vinegar water, brushing a hint of powder across her cheeks, changing her linen shift. The ritual continues, but the rhythm has slowed. The queen breathes carefully. Hey, each exhale, shallow but deliberate. You watch her reach for a tiny vial, her favorite distillation of lavender and rosemary. She uncorks it, inhales deeply, and lets out a sigh that trembles like parchment. It clears the mind, she whispers, almost to herself. Historians still argue whether her last months were filled with sickness or sorrow. Some say her health declined rapidly, the years of lead and sugar taking their toll. Others claim she simply refused to rest, driven by almost sacred sense of duty. Whatever the truth, her hygiene rituals, once theatrical now, feel almost devotional. The body that once symbolized England's purity has begun to falter. Her attendants notice it, her skin dry and thin, her appetite fading. Yet, every morning, she insists on the full ceremony of washing her face, perfuming her gloves, arranging her wig. It's no longer about beauty. It's about control. A soft, almost affectionate joke passes through your mind. After a lifetime of resisting dirt, Elizabeth is now just trying to resist time itself. In one rare entry from her physician's notes, he remarks that Her Majesty refused to sleep upon her bed these 3 nights. The courtiers worry. They beg her to rest. She shakes her head. "If I lay down," she says, "I may never rise." So she stands instead, dressed still in her fine gown, as though the act of disrobing would break the spell that keeps her alive. There's something heartbreakingly human in that image. The great queen of cleanliness, now afraid to be still, afraid that silence will reveal what scent and ceremony have long hidden. Outside her chamber, England waits. The courtiers whisper prayers, and still she performs her final act. She asks her maids to bring fresh linen, clean gloves, and her pearls. No one dares question it. As they prepare her, you notice the smallest detail. She smiles faintly at the scent of rosewater. It's the same fragrance she's used for decades, unchanged. Maybe it reminds her of her youth days when she walked through gardens laughing with courtiers, when her perfume was a declaration, not a defense. Historians still debate whether her death was peaceful. Some say she simply faded, standing tall until her body could no longer bear it. Others believe she whispered a prayer and let her head fall. But one thing is certain, she left the world as she lived in it, fragrant, poised, untouchable, and in that you realize something profound. The disgust that history heaps upon her hygiene isn't really about filth, it's about control. She dared to define what purity meant, even when it meant painting her face in poison and bathing her hair in perfume. She ruled her image so completely that even centuries later, people still argue about how she smelled. You picture her now, the scent of ambergris still lingering, the faint shimmer of powder on her brow. The woman who terrified kings and charmed poets stands alone, caught between myth and mortality. And as her candle finally gutters out, the perfume of her reign doesn't vanish, it drifts onward, carried by history, by rumor, by fascination. Now the scene softens. The sounds of the palace fade, the rustle of silk, the murmur of attendants, and what remains is the hush of night. You breathe slowly, the way she might have done, surrounded by the quiet hum of the world she once commanded. The scent of roses and wood smoke lingers in the air. You think about all those rituals, the vinegar rinses, the powders, the gloves steeped in amber, and realize they were never just vanity. They were her armor. Every layer of white paint, every perfumed glove was a shield against time, decay, and fear. In a strange way, you can almost admire her stubbornness. She refused to be ordinary, refused to yield to nature's mazines, even if her methods were bizarre or, frankly, a little disgusting. They worked in their own way. She built an empire out of illusion and held it together with the scent of roses. So, as you drift now, let the judgment fade. Let the laughter fade too. Picture her, serene and luminous, sitting beneath a high window as morning light touches her face. No mirrors, no masks, just quiet breath and fading perfume. The queen's story ends, but her mystery remains, suspended in that soft cloud of scent that history still can't quite name. Now breathe slowly. Feel the weight of centuries settle and dissolve. Let your thoughts quiet, your shoulders loosen, your heart beat slow, because even in her strangest, most human flaws, Elizabeth reminds you, power, like beauty, is never truly clean, but it can still be magnificent. Sleep well, traveler.